Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat in the back of the tent, uniform crisp, eyes steady, the weight of her rifle case resting against her boot. Around her, men spoke in shorthand, confident, quick, careless. Words like vector, insert, exfil. The kind of talk that came easy when you believed nothing could go wrong. Stay back with the vehicles while real operators handle this. The SEAL team leader didn't even look at her when he said it. Just tossed the order through the air like something that didn't matter. Morgan didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because 700 meters away, she had already found her position, high on a rocky slope, where the Hindu Kush looked endless and cruel. Her M2010 rifle rested on a slab of stone cooled by mountain wind, the scope already dialed, the world through her lens smaller and clearer than the noise of men who doubted her. Down below, the four-man reconnaissance element moved through the pine shadows, too relaxed, too confident. They didn't know yet. None of them did. That this valley didn't forgive mistakes. That something old waited for them in its silence. Morgan breathed slowly, the rhythm automatic, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 still. Her finger rested on the receiver, calm. She had been here before, not in this place but in this state, the fragile line between stillness and violence. The crosshairs found something wrong, a glint of light, no bigger than a coin, flashing where rock should be dull. She frowned. Metal where there shouldn't be metal, reflection from something man-made. It wasn't just terrain observation, it was recognition. Her mind drifted without losing focus, a memory more vivid than any photo. Montana, 1992. Breathe like the mountain breathes. Her grandfather's voice gravel and wisdom. She was 8, lying prone on a ridge above the family land. A cut-down Remington 700 hugged against her cheek. The stock smelled faintly of oil and pine. Remember what I told you about breathing. Jackson Reed's weathered hand, missing 2 fingers, corrected her grip. 4 in, she whispered. Hold 4 out, 4 wait 4. And when do you take the shot? At the bottom of the breath, she answered, in the stillness between heartbeats. The rifle kicked, gentle but surprising. A second later, a metallic ring echoed from the steel plate 300 yards away. Good, Jackson said. Not perfect. You flinched at the end again. She smiled anyway, because his voice carried something better than approval, belief. By sunset, she'd fired 30 rounds, each one followed by quiet lessons. When they walked back to the cabin, his hand settled on her shoulder. Your mother won't like today, he said softly. Is that why we only shoot when she visits Aunt Sarah? He chuckled. Maybe. She thinks you're too young, maybe she's right. But there are things I need to teach you, things that might matter someday. She didn't understand then. She only knew that when he said matter, he meant more than hitting a target. Years later, she would learn the truth, that Jackson Reed hadn't just been a hunter or even just a Marine sniper. After Korea, he'd been recruited into operations that didn't exist on paper. He'd worked in the shadows of the Cold War, where a steady hand meant survival. Grandpa, why's it so important? She had asked once. Mom says girls don't need to learn shooting. He had crouched until they were eye level, his gaze sharp but kind. Because the most dangerous predator never looks dangerous until it's too late. And sometimes, being underestimated is the best weapon you'll ever have. That phrase never left her. 4 years later, her mother was gone, cancer stealing what the war never could. Her father, William Reed, came home broken-armed from Iraq, his Ranger tab faded on his sleeve. Dad, she'd said quietly at the shooting bench behind the cabin, can we still live here? He nodded. This is our home now. He watched her line up an empty target and smiled, proud despite the grief. Your grandpa tells me you're quite the shot. Your mom wouldn't approve, but some skills are worth having, even if you pray you'll never need them. From that day, her training changed. Her grandfather taught precision. Her father taught survival. When the mountains froze and breath turned to mist, He made her crawl through snow with 50 pounds on her back. A good shooter hits a target, he said. A great one adapts when everything goes wrong. By 14, Morgan could hit a soda can at 300 meters with iron sights. That was when Colonel James Harrington found her. He'd watched from the sidelines of a youth competition, white hair under a cap, posture straight as a rifle barrel. After she outshot competitors twice her age, he approached her father. "Your daughter has rare talent," he said, handing over a card. "Army Marksmanship Unit. We nurture skill like hers." Her father hesitated. Her mother wouldn't want this. "What does she want?" Harrington asked. That night she'd seen her father staring at the card under a single lamp. "Mom wanted you to have choices I didn't have," he told her. "You've got the gift, Morgan. Just be sure it's your choice, not mine." She had nodded, but deep inside she already knew. It wasn't about the rifles, it was about control, focus, silence. By 18, after 9/11, she enlisted. On the morning she left, her younger sister, Elise, hugged her hard. "Don't try to be like Dad or Grandpa," Elise whispered. "I'm not," Morgan said. "I'm trying to be me." Her grandfather pressed a small brass compass into her hand, scuffed, old, warm from his palm. "It guided me through Korea," he said. "Let it guide you now." She never knew what he meant, not then. Basic, then marksmanship competitions, then ranger school. The Army tried to keep her behind a desk. Too valuable as a competitor, they'd said. She fought the system, one form at a time. At ranger school, Colonel Davis had looked at her record and frowned. "Your shooting scores are impressive, but this isn't a competition. It's combat leadership. Are you sure you belong here?" "With respect, sir," she'd said evenly, "I've been preparing my whole life." And she proved it mile after mile, blister after blister. Where others used brute strength, she used endurance. Where others panicked, she calculated. During the mountain phase, when sleep was a rumor and rain cut through skin, she saw a familiar figure step onto the range. Colonel Harrington, older now but his eyes still sharp. "Gentlemen," he said, then paused, deliberately glancing at her, "and Staff Sergeant Reed." That moment was subtle, but she'd felt it, recognition. Later, after the exercise, he stopped her. "Your grandfather taught you well," he said quietly. "You remind me of him." She'd blinked in surprise. "You knew him?" Harrington nodded. "Everyone in my generation knew the name Jackson Reed. He saved more lives than anyone realized." Then he leaned closer, his tone shifting. "Not everyone believes women belong in combat. Don't argue with them. Outperform them until doubt becomes impossible." Those words carried her through everything that followed. She graduated near the top of her class. Even Colonel Davis had shaken her hand, eyes grudgingly respectful. "I still have concerns," he'd admitted, "but you've proven exceptional capability. I hope I'm wrong." She'd smiled. "You are, sir." Then came the waiting, the red tape, the endless excuses about logistical needs. It was Harrington who finally cut through the bureaucracy. "Sometimes the system needs a push," he'd said. When her deployment orders arrived for Afghanistan, her father helped her pack. "The Hindu Kush is Montana," he warned, checking her gear. "High altitude, thin air. It'll mess with your shots." "I've studied the ballistics," she said. He nodded, then handed her an envelope. "Your grandfather left this for you, said not to open it until you're in country." The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. She tucked it inside the compass case. "You already made us proud," he said, hugging her with his good arm. That night Elise called from med school. "Are you scared?" "A little," Morgan admitted, "but I'm prepared." "Just come back in one piece," Elise said. "We've had enough wounded warriors." Morgan smiled faintly. "I'll try." Then Elise asked the question that lingered long after the call ended. "Have they accepted you yet? The Special Ops crowd?" Morgan hesitated. "They will." But the truth was they hadn't. 6 months later at Forward Operating Base Shank, she became known as the Guard Sniper. The title sounded polite, but it meant outsider, support, backup. Still, she earned respect the hard way. A confirmed kill at 1,100 meters on a bomb planter. A clean shot through dust and crosswind. The same SEALs who ignored her now watched from a distance, whispering. And yet, when briefing day came, Lieutenant Connor's tone hadn't changed. She remembered every word. Reed will provide overwatch from the high ground. The SEAL team handles the engagement. She's basically a relay. Chief Garrett had laughed. Nothing like bringing a National Guard sniper to a Tier 1 fight. Morgan said nothing, just folded the map. When the mission began, she moved ahead of them, climbing alone, heart steady, body silent. Now in the cold dawn above the valley, she watched them through her scope, 4 dark shapes threading through green. And in the quiet between her heartbeats, she saw it again, that faint reflection of metal. She adjusted focus. Something moved just slightly behind the rocks ahead of the SEALs. A gloved hand, maybe, a shift of color against the stone. Her pulse slowed, mind calculating. Overwatch to recon actual, she whispered. Possible observation point ahead. Suggest adjusting heading 090. Connor's voice came back curt. Negative, Overwatch. Maintain radio discipline unless contact is confirmed. She exhaled through her nose. They never listened. Below, the SEALs kept moving, straight toward the danger. She scanned left, right. Her eyes caught another detail, a bush that hadn't been there yesterday. Her grandfather's voice whispered in memory, the land remembers. If something looks new, it doesn't belong. Then the world exploded. A burst of PKM machine gun fire ripped from the ridge, cutting through the morning air like tearing cloth. The SEALs dove for cover, shouting. Connor's radio crackled with orders, overlapping panic. Morgan had already moved. Her scope locked onto the muzzle flashes, 12 of them she counted, interlocking arcs of fire, a textbook L-shaped ambush. She felt a cold realization settle in her chest. This wasn't random. This was planned. Her first shot broke the air, 740 meters, uphill wind 3.5 mils. Target down. The RPG man never saw it coming. Bolt cycle, breath, second target. Each shot came with machine precision, each breath deliberate. Connor's voice yelled something over comms, but she barely heard it. Another shadow moved, hand signals, coordinated fire. Her scope tracked the leader, a man wearing a chest rig and a Motorola radio. He paused. She took him through the upper chest, mid-word. The attack faltered, confused. Fighters advancing suddenly lost their rhythm. Morgan worked the bolt again, eyes scanning. The radio channels filled with static and fear. Within 5 minutes, she had neutralized 7 threats. She felt nothing, no thrill, no satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty of training doing exactly what it was meant to do. Then she saw him. On the far ridge, a figure moving differently, precise, purposeful, carrying a hard-sided case, watching the fight as if it were a test. For a split second, the light caught his face, older, scarred, disciplined. And something deep inside her whispered a name she hadn't spoken since childhood stories. The ghost of Hindu Kush. Her finger froze. Her grandfather's stories, the photos, the old dossiers, it couldn't be him. But the pattern, the trap, it was his. Overwatch to recon actual, she said, voice low. Enemy tactics consistent with Soviet-trained element. This isn't standard Taliban. No answer. The radio hissed under gunfire. She fired again, then again. The SEALs held, barely. 18 minutes later, the thunder of Apache rotors rolled across the valley. Relief wrapped in noise. When the dust settled, the survivors stood in silence. Connor looked up the slope where she lay hidden. That was you, he asked finally, voice flat. Morgan just nodded. Garrett stepped forward, arm bandaged. 9 confirmed, Best shooting I've ever seen." Connor removed his sunglasses. "I was wrong about you." The words cost him, but he said them. "About what you bring to the fight." Morgan gave the smallest nod. "We need to talk about what we encountered," she said quietly. "Those weren't standard insurgents." And somewhere deep inside, a truth began to stir, a ghost from her family's past. That night, when she opened the envelope her father had given her, the paper inside smelled faintly of cedar and gun oil. "If you're reading this, you followed the path I knew you would," her grandfather had written. "The mountains you're in hold secrets from my time. Look for a man called Hakim the Ghost. He knows things about Operation North Star. The greatest advantage in combat is to be underestimated. Use it wisely." Morgan stared at the words until they blurred. Somewhere out there, her grandfather's unfinished war was waiting for her. And the ghost of the Hindu Kush had just seen her face. She stood alone at dawn, the mountains painted in bruised gold. For a moment there was peace, thin air, cold breath, the steady heartbeat of someone who had survived what she wasn't supposed to. But peace in the Hindu Kush was never more than an illusion, the kind that fades the second you remember who's watching. "Ready for today's operation, Staff Sergeant." Lieutenant Connor's tone was quieter this time, not dismissive, not proud, just aware. Morgan looked up from her rifle, eyes unreadable. "Ready, sir." No condescension, no reminder to stay back. That alone said everything. Now, as she climbed the eastern ridge 700 meters above the valley floor, she felt something shift inside her, not pride, but calm validation. Yesterday, she was a liability in their eyes. Today, she was their lifeline. The valley below stretched like a scar, pine, stone, and silence. Morgan lay prone, her ghillie suit blending into the rock. The barrel of her M2010 pointed toward the horizon, but her mind was elsewhere in Montana, in that cabin where her grandfather had whispered about patience, about how the earth reveals truth if you breathe with it. She inhaled slowly. The world narrowed through her scope. Then she saw it. A patch of brush that didn't move with the wind. No sway, no life, just stillness pretending to be natural. "Overwatch to recon actual," she whispered. "Possible observation posture 2 o'clock, approximately 600 meters. "Copy that," Connor replied, his voice disciplined now. "Holding position." She smiled faintly. He was listening this time. Through her scope, Morgan scanned the area again because one fake bush meant others. Her instincts told her this wasn't isolated. It was pattern. Then she saw it, another mound, too symmetrical. Another shadow, too deliberate. A triangle of death forming in the valley below. Her stomach tightened. Soviet doctrine. 3-point triangulation. Overlapping lines of fire. The same patterns her grandfather had taught her to recognize when she was 14, studying the black and white photos he wasn't supposed to have. She adjusted magnification. And that's when she saw it, a gloved hand turning a spotting scope, wrist marked with a faded blue star tattoo. Her pulse hitched. The ghost. Not a myth, not a story told by an old man who'd fought too long ago to still matter. Real, alive, watching. Morgan's voice came steady despite the chill crawling up her spine. "Overwatch to recon actual, confirming 3 observation posts, professional concealment, high probability coordinated ambush. We're being set up." "Copy," Connor said, pausing just long enough for her to sense his tension. "Nature of threat." "High discipline, specialized equipment, Soviet patterns, recommend immediate tactical withdrawal." There was silence. She could almost see him weighing his pride against her words. Yesterday he might have ignored her. Today he didn't. "Recon element initiating tactical withdrawal," Connor said finally. "Maintain overwatch." Through her scope, Morgan watched the team shift formation, slow, careful, no panic. But the movement had already been seen. The man with the tattoo, Hakim, raised a hand, signaling toward the north ridge. Observer 1 is communicating, she warned. A second later, movement rippled through the trees, shapes emerging from the shadows, too precise to be insurgents. 10, maybe 12 fighters, coordinated, silent. Morgan steadied her breath. This was the moment before chaos, and she could feel her grandfather's presence like a whisper. Don't rush the world. Make it move to your rhythm. The radio crackled. Multiple armed personnel moving into position. Northern Ridge, she said. Copy, we're shifting to extraction point Alpha, Connor answered. But it was already too late. Gunfire erupted from the western post, bright arcs of death ripping through the air. Connor's team dove for cover, returning fire, their voices merging with the echo of distant rifles. Morgan moved like muscle memory. Her first shot broke the rhythm of gunfire. The man behind the PKM folded, his body jerking sideways. Western position neutralized, she reported. Her eyes darted across the scope. North Ridge fighters bounding in pairs, disciplined movement, the kind only men with training used. Her breath slowed, brain computing angles, elevation, wind. She picked them off one by one, deliberate, patient. No anger, just calculation. Then she saw him again. Azam Hakim, the ghost of Hindu Kush, standing higher than the others, directing movement with hand signals older than the soldiers below him. His scar visible even through the scope, a line cutting down from his eye to his jaw, like someone had tried to erase him and failed. For years, she'd thought he was a ghost from her grandfather's stories. Now he was flesh, commanding men in a war her family had already fought. Connor's voice bled into her headset. We're pinned, requesting support. Copy, she said. Machine gun team north neutralized. Another shot cracked. Another body dropped. The seals crawled through dust and shattered branches, moving toward the stream bed. Connor's leadership was crisp now, concise, focused. Garrett was dragging a wounded man. Then Morgan saw the southern ridge, empty seconds ago, begin to move. 15 fighters advancing with RPGs. New contact south, she said urgently. You're surrounded. Negative overwatch, Connor replied. No exit path. Morgan felt her father's voice echo from memory. When you can't change the odds, change the battlefield. Recon actual, she said, tone steel. I'm repositioning. You'll hear sustained fire from the east. When it starts, move northwest through the stream bed. Negative, Connor snapped. Too risky. With respect, sir, she said quietly, you've got 10 minutes before they overrun you. I can change that. Static, then his answer came low. Confirmed, we move on your mark. Morgan packed her essentials, rifle, rangefinder, extra mags. Every motion controlled. She crawled sideways through rock and shadow, using the slope to stay hidden. When she reached the new ridge, the view was perfect. The southern force exposed, confident, unaware that their predator had moved. She pulled the rifle into her shoulder, whispered to herself, breathe like the mountain. The first shot shattered their rhythm, the second broke their line, the third created panic. Within seconds, the disciplined formation devolved into chaos. Moving now, Connor's voice came, northwest stream bed. She fired again, cutting down 2 more RPG carriers. Smoke rose from the hillside. The Taliban fighters, now disoriented, poured rounds into the rocks trying to find her. Bullets chipped stone inches from her head. Dust stung her eyes. But she stayed calm, deliberate, shifting position after every 2 shots. She could feel the battle turning. Her shots weren't just defense, they were control. Recon team clear, Connor reported finally. Withdraw now. Copy. She fired 3 final rounds, precise, punishing, then rolled from her perch just as the hillside exploded. RPGs tore into the rock where she'd been seconds earlier. She hit the ground hard, pain lancing through her shoulder, but she was already moving. Crawling, sliding, breathing through the ache. As she navigated the slope, movement flickered at the edge of her vision, a single figure packing her from the ridgeline above. She froze, turned her scope upward. Hakim. For a long moment, they watched each other through the glass, her crosshairs centered on his chest, his cold eyes staring straight through her. Then he lifted a radio to his lips and said something she couldn't hear. When she blinked, he was gone. Her pulse thundered. He tracked her deliberately, not her team, her. Approaching extraction point from the east, she reported, forcing her voice steady. Possible high-value target in pursuit. Negative, Connor's reply came sharp. We're not leaving without you. Garrett and Diaz moving to your position. She almost laughed, one dry, breathless sound. Yesterday, he would have left her behind without blinking. Now, he was risking his team to get her out. She reached the plateau overlooking the LZ, saw the SEALs forming a defensive ring as the helicopter descended in a storm of dust. She broke from cover, sprinting low and fast. Then movement. Above the LZ, a figure crouched behind rocks, leveling a weapon at the incoming helicopter. Her breath caught. It was Hakim. He was aiming a Cornet launcher straight at them. No time to think, no time to warn. She dropped prone, exhaled, squeezed. The round hit his shoulder, spinning him backward. The missile clattered harmlessly onto the rocks. Missile threat neutralized, she called out. HVT wounded but mobile. Copy, Connor shouted. 30 seconds to extraction. She ran. The helicopter's downdraft hit like a wall, tearing at her ghillie suit. Garrett reached out, grabbing her by the vest, yanking her in. Hakim escaped, she said over the roar. The ghost, Garrett's eyes widened. That guy's a myth. Not anymore. As the Black Hawk lifted off, Morgan looked back at the ridge. A silhouette stood there in the haze, still, watching, and even through the dust she knew it was him. The flight back was silent, each man staring at nothing, replaying the moments they nearly didn't make it. Morgan stared at her hands, steady, unshaking, but inside her chest felt hollow. She won the battle but lost something invisible, the illusion that her grandfather's past was buried. When they landed, Major Whitaker was waiting with someone she hadn't expected, Colonel Harrington. He was older, but his presence filled the room like gravity. Lieutenant Connor, Staff Sergeant Reed, he greeted. We need to talk about what happened out there. They followed him into a secure room, the door locked, static hum filled the air. Staff Sergeant Reed, Harrington said, I understand you had visual confirmation of Azam Hakim during the engagement. Yes, sir, she said. He was directing the ambush. I wounded him before extraction. Something flickered in Harrington's expression, recognition mixed with worry. He activated a counter-surveillance field. What I'm about to tell you is classified above your clearance, he said quietly. But you deserve to know. Hakim isn't just a warlord. He's a relic GRU Spetsnaz, Cold War era, your grandfather's opposite number. Morgan's heart stopped. My grandfather. Jackson Reed led CIA operations against Soviet advisors in this very region, Harrington said. Their mission, Operation North Star, was to locate hidden weapons caches the Soviets buried decades ago. Hakim oversaw their creation. She felt the air thin, and now he's back for them. Exactly. The ambush, the specialized weapons, it all fits. Those caches were never fully destroyed. One code name kept appearing in our decrypted archives, Hades. Connor leaned forward. What's in it? Something dangerous, Harrington said simply. Something that shouldn't exist. Morgan reached into her pocket, pulling out her grandfather's brass compass. He gave me this before I enlisted, she said softly. Told me it would guide me. Harrington took it, turning it over, eyes narrowing. This isn't just a compass. He pressed a hidden latch. The base clicked open, revealing a microfilm capsule no bigger than a bullet casing. He smiled grimly. Classic Jackson Reed. What's on it? She asked. Maybe the location of Hades, Harrington said. And now we know why the ghost wanted you alive. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, Morgan felt something like fear. Not of death, but of destiny. Because her grandfather hadn't just trained her to shoot. He'd trained her to finish a war he'd started half a century ago. And somewhere in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, a scarred man with cold eyes was waiting for her to do exactly that. Why did her hands tremble when the world finally went quiet? Hours after the debrief, Morgan sat alone in her bunk, staring at the open compass on her palm. The tiny microfilm cylinder glimmered in the dim light, an impossible thread between past and present. It smelled faintly of oil and dust, the scent of every rifle range, every memory, every ghost. Outside, the base hummed like a caged machine. Helicopters rotated, generators droned, and men laughed in that too loud way soldiers do when they've nearly died and don't know what to do with the leftover fear. Morgan stayed still. Her body was sore, her mind not. Inside, something older than exhaustion pulsed, a need to understand why her grandfather's shadow still shaped her life. Permission to come in. It was Lieutenant Connor, standing in the doorway, still in his dusty uniform. His tone carried something new, not command, not mockery. Respect. Yeah, she said quietly. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Harrington said you're being reassigned. She didn't react. To what? Something called Task Force North Star, he said. Classified, multi-branch, you, me, and a few others. Apparently, we poked a nest that's been untouched since the Cold War. Morgan looked up, her expression unreadable. He wants us to find it. Connor nodded. Or destroy it, depends on what it is. She turned the compass over in her hands. My grandfather called it unfinished business. Guess I finally know what he meant. Connor hesitated before asking, do you think the ghost knew who you were? I think he knew exactly who I was, she said, and I think he wanted me to know he was still out there. Connor gave a short nod, then handed her a sealed folder. Our orders, wheels up at 400. Harrington's leading the mission from Bagram. We're heading deep into Kunar province, no comms, no support, just us. He started to leave, then paused. Reed, yesterday we would have been dead without you. I never said it before, but... You don't have to, she said softly. I know. He smiled faintly. Still, for the record, I was wrong about you. When he left, she let the silence settle again. Her heart beat slow, calm. Then she reached for the folded note she'd found beneath the microfilm. Her grandfather's handwriting, careful and deliberate. North Star was never about weapons, it said. It was about what the Soviets buried to protect them. She read it again, and again, until the words blurred into fear. By dawn, Task Force North Star assembled in the hangar, a small, grim collection of soldiers and ghosts in camouflage. Connor, Garrett, a young intel officer named Ruiz, and an old CIA liaison who said nothing but smoked endlessly, like the world already owed him an apology. Colonel Harrington stood before them, eyes sharp despite the years. 2 days ago, he began, you encountered an enemy force led by Azam Hakim, known locally as the Ghost of the Hindu Kush. Intelligence confirms he commands a network of former Soviet-trained operatives and their descendants. Their objective is the recovery of a hidden weapons cache known by the codename Hades. He paused, looking directly at Morgan. What most of you don't know, he continued, is that Hades predates this war. In 1985, the Soviets constructed a secure bunker complex deep within the mountains. The project was scrubbed, the site buried during the withdrawal, but not before they tested something that changed the landscape. Literally. Ruiz frowned. Chemical. Harrington's voice stayed low. We don't know, only that the classified notes refer to it as a deterrent that leaves no battlefield to fight on. Connor glanced at Morgan. She was motionless, eyes locked on Harrington. He continued, Your grandfather's unit was sent here in 1989 to locate and neutralize Hades. Only one team member survived, Jackson Reed. He claimed the mission failed due to bad intel. But we now know he destroyed the access tunnels himself to stop someone from getting there first. The hangar was silent. Morgan's throat felt dry. "Sir," she said softly, "you think Hakim's trying to finish what they started?" Harrington nodded, "And he'll need what's on that microfilm to do it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Jackson trusted you with that compass for a reason. You carry not just his skill but his judgment. Trust that." Morgan nodded once. Hours later, the helicopter thundered into the pale sky, slicing through dawn mist toward Kunnar's jagged teeth. The team spoke little. The weight of old wars pressed down on new armor. Garrett checked his gear for the third time. "Feels strange," he muttered. "Going ghost hunting with an actual ghost story leading us." Connor gave a dry laugh. "You believe in legends now." Garrett shrugged. "Yesterday I didn't." Morgan didn't speak. Her gaze stayed fixed on the compass in her palm, the needle trembling slightly as if alive. Every vibration from the helicopter seemed to make it quiver toward one direction, northeast, toward the mountains she'd seen in her dreams since childhood. After 2 hours, they landed near a narrow valley carved by time and artillery. Broken bunkers, rusted helmets, bones of past wars. Harrington's voice came through the headset. "Your objective is a site identified as Red Echo marked on the map. Intelligence suggests it overlaps with an old Soviet research outpost. Proceed with caution. No electronic pings. Stay dark." "Copy," Connor replied. They moved on foot, slow, methodical. Thin air burned their lungs. Every sound felt amplified in the silence of altitude. At 11,000 feet, the wind carried whispers through the ravine, the kind of sound that makes soldiers talk less and listen more. Ruiz broke the quiet first. "You think this place remembers?" Garrett glanced at him. "What?" "The people who died here," Ruiz said softly. "You think the land remembers?" Morgan spoke without looking back. "It never forgets." The compass needle jittered again. She stopped, kneeling, adjusting her direction. "This way." "How do you know?" Connor asked. She hesitated. "Because it's pointing me there." The trail led them to a sheer wall of granite. For a moment, it looked impassable. Then Morgan noticed the patterned, small stones arranged at unnatural intervals, covered by decades of moss. Her grandfather's field mark. She brushed away the moss. Beneath it, faint Cyrillic letters etched into the stone. Ruiz read aloud. "North Star." Connor exhaled. "We found it." They set up a small perimeter while Morgan searched for an entry. Her gloved hands traced the wall until she found a rusted steel hatch, sealed with welded reinforcement. She tapped it lightly, hollow. "Thermite charge," she said. Connor nodded. "Do it." The blast was dull and slow, the metal melting away like candle wax. Inside, a black tunnel gaped open, breathing cold air from another century. Garrett aimed his flashlight inside. "Jesus, smells like the grave." "Or history," Morgan said quietly. They moved in. The tunnel sloped downward, walls lined with old Soviet signage, wires hanging like veins. Dust floated in the beam of their lights. At a junction, Ruiz pointed at a cracked terminal. "Still some power." Connor shook his head. "Don't touch it, could trigger an alarm." Morgan's light caught something on the wall, an emblem half buried under grime. A red star encircling a serpent eating its tail. "Hades," she whispered. They pressed deeper. The air thickened, the smell of iron and old oil coating their throats. Then the silence broke. From somewhere ahead, faint but distinct, came the metallic echo of movement. Boots. Connor raised his fist. "Hold." They listened. 1, 2, 3 steps, then silence again. Morgan's pulse slowed, controlled. She leaned close to Connor. "We're not alone." He nodded. "Garrett, cover rear. Ruiz, light off. We go silent." They advanced another 20 meters. The tunnel widened into a chamber, and what they saw stopped them cold. Rows of sealed canisters stacked like coffins, Soviet lettering, warning labels in faded red. Inya otekea yeruveate yeri opea snl. Ruiz swallowed. "That means do not open, dangerous." Garrett muttered, "No kidding." In the center of the room stood a rusted console with a single monitor, dark, except for one flickering light. Next to it lay a body, old, desiccated, wrapped in fragments of a Soviet uniform. Morgan knelt beside it. The bones of one hand still clutched a metal case. She pried it free. Inside, papers, photographs, and a small patch embroidered with the same serpent emblem. Connor's voice was barely a whisper. "What the hell is this place?" Harrington's voice came through faint static in their earpieces. "That's your proof. Hades wasn't just storage, it was experimentation." Morgan flipped through the photos. The images were grainy, brutal soldiers collapsing in trenches, entire valleys turned black, not from fire, from something else. She stared at one image, a group of operatives in snow camouflage. And there in the corner, unmistakable, her grandfather, young, unsmiling. Beside him, another man. The same scarred face she'd seen on the ridge. Her breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They work together." Connor frowned. "Who?" "My grandfather and Hakim." The words felt impossible as she said them. Harrington's voice came through again, tight. "Get out of there. Now. The ghost isn't just following you, he's following the same trail your grandfather once walked. And if they built this together." The transmission cut off. Static filled their ears. Connor hissed, "Comms are jammed." The tunnel lights flickered. Somewhere behind them, metal groaned, the unmistakable sound of a door locking. Garrett cursed, "We're sealed in." Then came another sound, a voice, distant, echoing through the chamber. "Morgan Reed," it said, calm, measured. "You carry his eyes." She froze. It was him. The ghost. The voice came again, closer now. "Your grandfather was a great man. He built this place to contain what no nation should ever own. I built it to ensure it could never be destroyed." Connor raised his weapon, scanning the dark. "Show yourself." A beam of light cut through the gloom. A silhouette stepped forward, carrying no rifle, only calm. His face scarred, his gaze sharp enough to wound. "Jackson Reed understood that power must be feared to be respected," he said. "But he forgot what fear does to men. It breaks them, just as it broke him." Morgan felt the world tilt. "You knew him." "I trained beside him," Hakim said, "and I buried him." Her heart lurched. "You're lying." He smiled faintly. "Am I?" Before she could answer, the lights died completely. And in the blackness of the Soviet tomb, the past came alive again. Darkness, the kind that breathes. The air in the bunker turned alive, each sound multiplied, each heartbeat too loud. The world had no shape now, only pulse and memory. "Morgan," Connor whispered, "light." She flicked her wrist lamp on the narrow cone of white cutting through dust like a blade. The others followed, small beams crisscrossing the black. The chamber looked different in fractured light, shadows taller, corners deeper, faces pale. No sign of the ghost. Then a voice, smooth, disembodied, rolled through the dark. "Your grandfather stood where you stand. Same fear. Same question, what do we do when we build something we cannot control?" Morgan scanned the walls, her rifle steady. "You killed him." The voice laughed softly, almost regretful. "He killed himself long before I found him." Garrett shifted his grip. "What the hell does that mean?" The reply came from behind them this time, echoing off the metal. "It means Jackson Reed made a choice, to destroy what he didn't understand. But the thing about ghosts, soldier, they don't die when the body does." Connor gestured sharply to Morgan. "We move. Find an alternate exit before we're boxed in." She nodded. They fanned out, flashlights slicing through decades of dust and silence. Every wall looked identical: Soviet concrete, old warning signs, peeling red paint. Morgan's light caught a panel near the far corner, a hatch recessed behind corroded piping. She motioned to Connor. "Here." Garrett pulled his multi-tool, prying the bolts loose. The hatch groaned open, releasing a gust of stale air. A narrow tunnel stretched downward into darkness. Ruiz swallowed. "I'll take point." "No," Morgan said quietly. "I will." Connor met her gaze, reading the calm in it. "Go." She moved first, crawling through the tunnel, the ceiling low, the air colder the deeper they went. Every sound echoed: her breath, the scuff of her boots, the faint metallic click of her rifle sling. Behind her, the others followed, one by one, their breathing the only proof of life. Halfway through, her flashlight flickered. She tapped it, the beam stuttered, then steadied again. For a second, she saw something on the wall, painted symbols, faded with time. A compass star inside a circle. North Star's mark, her grandfather. She froze, tracing it with her glove. "He was here," she whispered. Connor's voice came low behind her. "Your grandfather?" "Yes." "How do you know?" "He left these marks everywhere he went," she said softly, "like breadcrumbs." They crawled another 20 meters before the tunnel opened into a small chamber, a storage room maybe. Crates, papers, old maps scattered like forgotten bones. Garrett stepped forward, flashlight scanning. "Looks like a command post." Morgan crossed to a metal desk. Dust coated everything, but her fingers brushed something sharp beneath it, a small wooden box. She lifted it, wiped off the grime, and froze. Carved into the lid, a familiar symbol. The same serpent eating its tail emblem, and below it, initials burned into the wood. J.R. Her heart twisted. This was his. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a faded notebook, pages fragile as breath. On the first page, her grandfather's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you found the truth I couldn't carry home." Her hands shook slightly as she turned the page. Operation North Star was never meant to find Hades. It was meant to protect it. What lies here isn't a weapon, it's a disease. Engineered by the Soviets, perfected in silence. Airborne, invisible, self-replicating. We called it the Whisper. The words blurred in her vision. Garrett leaned closer. "A biological weapon." Morgan nodded faintly. "He said they tested it, that it changed the landscape." Connor's face hardened. "So Hakim isn't after weapons, he's after leverage." Before she could answer, a metallic clang echoed from above, faint but deliberate. Ruiz stiffened. "We're not alone down here." Morgan snapped the notebook shut. "Move, deeper tunnel now." They rushed into another corridor, their boots thudding against metal. The air grew colder, heavier. Condensation dripped from the ceiling like slow rain. Then the voice again, amplified, taunting. "You think your grandfather destroyed Hades? No, he only locked it away and left me the key." Morgan's pulse quickened. "He's in the ventilation shafts." Connor cursed. "He's toying with us." "Not toying," she said, "testing." They pressed on, turning corner after corner. The deeper they went, the louder the hum of old machinery became, generators that shouldn't still be alive after 40 years. Garrett stopped at a rusted bulkhead. "You hearing that?" They listened. A faint rhythm pulsed from behind the wall like breathing, mechanical, steady. Morgan glanced at Ruiz. "Cut it open." The torch hissed, sparks lighting the dark like fireflies. The smell of burned metal filled the air. When the panel fell, light spilled from the chamber beyond, pale blue, sterile, wrong. They stepped inside. Rows of glass cylinders lined the room, each filled with cloudy liquid. Inside floated things that once had been human. Ruiz recoiled. "Jesus Christ." Morgan's stomach turned, but her eyes stayed fixed. Experiment subjects. Connor's jaw clenched. So it's true, the Soviets were trying to make something. Not something, she said, someone. The figures in the tanks had faint implants along their spines, tubing connected to skull ports. Soldiers, engineered, maybe infected. Garrett gagged softly. Why would anyone? Because they thought fear could be harnessed, said a voice from the shadows. They turned. Hakim stepped from behind the tanks, calm, unarmed. His scarred face glowed faintly in the blue light. His eyes found Morgan, and for the first time she saw no malice, only history. You see now, he said quietly, what your grandfather and I built together. Connor raised his rifle. Don't move. Hakim didn't flinch. Shoot if you must, it changes nothing. Morgan held up a hand. Wait. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile what she saw with what she'd believed her whole life. He built this with you. Hakim nodded. He believed humanity could control its own fear, that by confronting it, by weaponizing it, war would become impossible. That's insane, Connor snapped. Is it? Hakim asked softly. Your nation spent decades perfecting ways to kill faster. He thought this would make men afraid to start wars at all. Morgan felt the world tilt again. Her grandfather, the man who taught her patience, integrity, part of this horror. You said you buried him, she said, her voice trembling. Where? Hakim looked down. In these mountains not far from here. He came back years after he swore it was over. He tried to destroy it all. We fought. He begged me to help. I couldn't. Why? She demanded. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. Because he wasn't my enemy. He was my mirror, and mirrors should not shatter each other. Connor moved in front of her. Enough, hands where I can see them. Hakim slowly lifted his hands. You think I want to restart this project? No, I want to make sure no one ever finds it again. But your people are curious. They always are. Morgan's hand tightened on her rifle. Then why ambush us? To test you, he said simply. To see if you carried his resolve. Now I know you do. The words chilled her more than the air. Garrett's voice cracked. What does that even mean? Hakim looked directly at Morgan. He left you the compass. That means you can find what I cannot, the failsafe, the control chamber. Without it, these devices will decay, but if anyone reactivates them. He trailed off. Connor frowned. What happens? Then the whisper wakes again. Suddenly the base trembled, a deep, groaning quake that threw them against the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms flickered to life for the first time in decades, red light spinning. What did you do? Connor shouted. Hakim looked up, eyes wide with alarm. It wasn't me. You triggered the failsafe by opening the bulkhead. Morgan turned to the console near the tanks, numbers flashing in Cyrillic, a timer counting down. She read aloud, System purge, biocontainment release in 5 minutes. Ruiz's voice broke. It's going to vent the entire facility. Hakim stepped forward urgently. The control chamber is below, east wing. You can still shut it down. Connor didn't move. We're not following you anywhere. Morgan met Hakim's eyes. You know the way. He nodded. Then we follow him, she said. Connor grabbed her arm. He's the enemy. She met his gaze. He's the only one who understands this place. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to silence, just the two of them, the weight of trust balanced on a knife. Then Connor released her arm. You lead, Reed, but if he twitches wrong. I'll handle it, she said. They ran through flickering corridors, sirens screaming, the floor vibrating beneath their boots. Morgan led with her rifle, Hakim a step ahead, limping slightly but fast. At the end of a long hallway stood a reinforced door, marked with the same serpent emblem. Hakim slammed his palm against an old keypad. Nothing. He looked back at her. You have the compass. She nodded, pulling it out. The brass gleamed red under the emergency lights. "Open it," he said. She did. Inside, the microfilm capsule blinked faintly, an embedded diode she hadn't noticed before. Hakim pressed it against the panel. The locks clicked open. "How?" "Your grandfather built it that way," he said. "For you." They rushed inside. The control room glowed dimly, full of analog gauges and rotary dials. On the main console, the countdown ticked down. 2:17, 2:16. Ruiz dove for the interface. "I can't read this. It's all Cyrillic." Hakim moved beside him, translating quickly. "Manual override here." Morgan took position by the viewport. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the containment chamber, liquid pumping through pipes, pressure rising. Hakim shouted, "The valves are sealing. We need to vent manually." Connor grabbed a lever on the far side, straining. "It's jammed." Morgan dropped her rifle, ran to help, their combined strength forcing it down. The noise roared, metal screeching, steam bursting. The timer hit 00:15. "Now," Hakim yelled. "Override sequence 427." Ruiz entered the code. The lights flickered, the alarm dropped an octave, then silence. The counter froze at 00:02. Everyone stood still, gasping, eyes wide. It was over. Or so they thought. A soft hiss came from the far vent, a single line of vapor escaping, faint, silver. Hakim's face went pale. "Seal it." But it was too late. The vapor touched the air, and the air moved. Morgan felt the first sting in her throat, sharp and cold. Not smoke, something else. "The whisper," Hakim said quietly. "It remembers." Morgan's vision blurred for a moment, then steadied. She felt her breath slow, controlled, steady, as if her body refused panic. Connor coughed, pulling up his mask. "We're compromised." She looked at the compass still glowing faintly in her hand. Her grandfather's voice echoed through her memory. "Fear is contagious. Courage must be stronger." She sealed her mask and turned to the team. "We still have to get out." Hakim nodded once. "This way." They moved fast, through flickering light, through echoes of a war that refused to die. And behind them, in the quiet dark of the containment room, the hiss of the whisper continued, slow, patient, and alive. What happens when silence starts breathing? The hiss from the containment chamber was faint at first, a whisper too soft to be real, but then it grew, not louder, closer, the kind of sound that crawls into your lungs before your brain understands what's wrong. "Masks on," Connor ordered, his voice sharp through the filter. The team sealed their respirators, but the damage had already begun. Ruiz's hands shook as he tried to secure his mask. His cough was wet, broken. Garrett grabbed him, forcing the straps tight. "Stay with me," Garrett growled. "You're fine." But Morgan saw the fear in Ruiz's eyes, not panic, something worse. Awareness. The realization that air itself had turned against them. Hakim moved quickly, his limp more pronounced now. "The secondary vent lines lead to the east shaft," he said. "It's old, but it connects to the surface." Connor glanced at Morgan. "You trust him?" She hesitated, watching the ghost's movements. Efficient, calm, not desperate. "I trust his knowledge," she said finally, "not his intentions." "That's a start," Connor muttered. They moved through the corridor, boots striking metal in rhythm with the alarm. The red emergency lights cast the world in pulses like a dying heartbeat. As they reached the junction, Morgan felt something strange. The hum of the facility had changed. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was organic, a low vibration beneath their feet like something vast and sleeping had stirred. She turned to Hakim. "What is it?" He didn't answer. "Hakim," she snapped. His eyes flickered toward the ceiling. "The whisper isn't chemical, it's parasitic, nanobiological, it adapts to oxygen, if containment fails." He stopped. Connor gritted his teeth. "If containment fails, what?" "It learns," Hakim said quietly. "It remembers every host it touches." Ruiz stumbled. What does that mean? Morgan steadied him. It means we don't breathe without filters, not for a second. They pressed on. The tunnel curved downward again, air growing denser, heavy with moisture and something else, the faint metallic scent of decay. At the next junction, Garrett froze. Movement ahead. They raised their weapons. Shapes flickered in the light, too, maybe 3 figures moving slowly, erratically. Morgan whispered, "Not ours." Connor signaled silently. They advanced, weapons ready. The figures emerged, Soviet uniforms faded to gray, flesh pale as ash. Not alive, not entirely dead either. Their eyes were milk white, their skin webbed with black veins. They moved like puppets underwater. Ruiz whispered, horrified, "Dear God." Hakim's voice came low. "The whisper doesn't kill, it repurposes." The nearest creature turned its head, soundless. Then it lunged. Morgan fired first, a single precise shot to the chest. The body staggered but didn't fall. Connor's burst took it down, but another moved in from the side. Garrett fired point blank. "They just keep coming." "Go," Morgan shouted. "Move." They ran, firing in controlled bursts, the confined space amplifying every echo into thunder. Shell casings clattered across metal floors. At the far end of the corridor, Hakim slammed a door release. The bulkhead slid open just enough for them to slip through before he sealed it shut. He turned to Morgan, breath heavy through the mask. "Now you understand why this place must die." She stared at him, chest heaving. "You created this." "No," he said quietly. "We tried to contain it, but your grandfather believed containment wasn't enough." "He was right," she said. For a long moment, they stood in silence, 2 generations worth of mistakes reflected in their eyes. Connor broke it first. "We can debate guilt later. How far to the east shaft?" 600 meters, Hakim said, "but we'll have to pass through the lower lab." Ruiz coughed again, doubled over. I ca. Garrett grabbed his vest. "You can, let's go." They moved fast, descending a spiral stairwell that felt like it might collapse at any step. Steam hissed from cracks in the walls. The entire structure groaned like something alive and suffering. Halfway down, the lights flickered again. The air shimmered faintly, like heat mirage. Then came the whispers. Not noise, words. Soft, broken, overlapping, hundreds of voices whispering in languages she didn't recognize. Some old, some impossibly new. Ruiz clutched his head. "Make it stop." "Keep moving," Connor shouted. But Morgan hesitated for just a second. The whispers weren't random. They were calling her name. "Morgan." Her heart hammered. She turned, no one, just empty air vibrating with memory. Hakim noticed her stillness. "Don't listen," he said firmly. "It feeds on focus. The more you hear, the more it learns your thoughts." She forced herself to look forward, one breath at a time. At the bottom of the stairwell, they reached the lower lab. The room was flooded knee-deep with stagnant water. Equipment floated, papers, syringes, fragments of glass. Connor swept his flashlight across the far wall. There, exit tunnel. They waded through the murky water. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. Then a splash behind them. Garrett spun, rifle raised. Contact. The water rippled. One of the infected soldiers erupted from beneath, dragging Ruiz under. "Ruiz," Morgan shouted. She fired into the water, red mist rising. Garrett lunged forward, pulling Ruiz up, his mask cracked, eyes wide with panic. "I'm fine," Ruiz gasped. "I'm." Then he froze, his pupils dilated, veins darkened under his skin. Morgan saw it happening, the infection moving like ink through glass. "No," she whispered. Hakim grabbed her arm. "He's gone." Ruiz convulsed, reaching toward her, then collapsed face first into the water. Garrett's voice broke. "We can't just leave him." Connor's tone was hard. "We have to." Morgan knelt, closing Ruiz's eyes. "Rest now," she murmured. "The mountain will remember." She stood, something inside her shifting from grief to resolve. "Let's finish this." They pressed on. By the time they reached the east shaft, the world behind them had become a nightmare, the hum of machinery replaced by the low moan of wind through broken vents. The ladder stretched upward into darkness, endless. Connor went first, then Garrett. Morgan climbed third, Hakim behind her. The metal was slick, freezing to the touch. Halfway up, a gust of air blew down, carrying the faint scent of pine and freedom. They were close. But then, a rumble below. Morgan looked down. The water level was rising fast, black liquid surging up the shaft walls. "The purge system's flooding the tunnels," Hakim shouted. "We triggered the failsafe." "Move," Connor barked. They climbed faster. The sound of rushing liquid grew louder, closer, a roar like an approaching storm. At the final rung, Connor slammed his shoulder into the hatch. It didn't budge. "Sealed," he shouted. Garrett climbed up beside him, helping to pry it open. "Push." The hatch groaned, then gave way. Cold air burst in, the sweet sting of mountain wind. Connor climbed out first, pulling Garrett after him. Morgan followed, gasping as fresh air hit her lungs. She turned, reaching down. "Hakim, your hand." He hesitated, looking back down the shaft. "What are you doing?" she shouted. His eyes met hers, calm, resigned. "Someone has to close it from below. If the hatch remains open, the whisper will reach the surface." Connor's voice cut through. "We'll seal it from here." Hakim shook his head. "You can't. The internal valve must be locked manually." Morgan's grip tightened. "No, you're not dying for this." He smiled faintly. "Not dying, returning." And before she could react, he released her hand. "No," she screamed. He fell backward into the darkness, his figure swallowed by shadow. A moment later, the hatch below sealed shut with a heavy metallic thud. The roar of the flood stopped. Silence returned. Morgan stared at the hatch, her heart pounding. For the first time, she didn't know whether she'd just lost an enemy or an ally. Garrett sat down heavily, shaking his head. "He bought us time." Connor was silent for a moment, then keyed his radio. "Command, this is Recon Actual. Extraction needed. Coordinates transmitting now. We have containment breach at Site Hades. 1 KIA, 1 missing." Static answered, then a voice. "Copy Recon Actual. Extraction inbound. 10 mics." Morgan looked east. The horizon was breaking open, sunrise spilling gold over the peaks. For a moment it felt peaceful. Then she noticed something. The compass in her hand, the brass surface now faintly pulsing with light. She opened it. The needle wasn't steady anymore. It was spinning. Garrett frowned. "What does that mean?" Morgan stared at it. "It means it's not over." Behind them, far below the mountain, a dull vibration rippled through the ground, deep and slow. Connor turned. "What was that?" Morgan's eyes stayed on the horizon. "The whisper's not dead, it's adapting." Connor's voice was a whisper now. "You think it got out?" She didn't answer, because in her mind, she could still hear faint voices carried by the wind, fragments of whispers speaking her name in a dozen languages. And she knew the truth. It wasn't asking for help. It was remembering her. How do you know when a ghost has followed you home? 3 days after the mountain, forward base Kestrel felt wrong. The air smelled the same. The walls looked the same. But something in the silence had changed, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Morgan walked through the compound at dawn, her rifle slung low, the brass compass still clutched in her hand. The needle had stopped spinning. It pointed north again, steady, unwavering, like nothing had happened. But she didn't believe it. Every step echoed sharper than it should. Every distant voice made her pause. She'd been in combat zones long enough to know when tension lived in the air. And this, whatever it was, didn't feel like tension. It felt like memory. Inside the operations tent, Lieutenant Connor sat hunched over the map table, red lines marking the route from Cunnar to Hades' site. His face looked older, not tired, aged. He didn't look up as she entered, Garrett still coughing blood. He got checked by medical. They said it's altitude sickness. He gave a hollow laugh. Yeah, right. Morgan pulled off her gloves, sitting across from him. Ruiz is gone. Hakim's gone. That valley is sealed. Maybe that's the best we can do. Connor finally met her eyes. You think it's contained? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe the hatch held. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the vapor escaping, the thin, silver thread that didn't stop. I think it's waiting, she said softly. Connor exhaled, leaning back. You sound like him. Hakim. He nodded. He said the same thing once, that some wars don't end, they just change shape. Morgan's jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a helicopter lifted off, its rotors chopping the dawn air into something metallic and harsh. Connor rubbed his temples. Harrington wants a full debrief tonight. Command sending a team from Langley to assess contamination potential. Morgan's eyes flicked to the compass. What about you? You've been feeling strange. Connor hesitated. Define strange. She looked at him steadily. Hearing things, smelling metal when there's none, feeling watched. He didn't answer, didn't need to. Because they both knew. It started small. Whispers in the wind when she closed her eyes, a flicker of motion in the corner of her vision, the hum of the bass generator's shifting pitch when she passed. At first, she thought it was exhaustion. Then she saw the shadow in the mirror, standing a step behind her when no one was there. Later that morning, she visited Garrett in the infirmary. He was pale, sweating, shirt clinging to his back. The medical tech adjusted his IV, murmuring something about dehydration. When the medic left, Garrett looked up at her, eyes glassy. You ever hear it? Her pulse quickened. Hear what? The whispering, he said, when everything's quiet, like it's inside the walls. She sat beside him, keeping her voice calm. You've been through hell, Garrett. It could be trauma. The brain replays noise when it doesn't understand silence. He smiled faintly. You don't believe that? No, she admitted, I don't. He reached for her hand, his skin was cold. I saw him, Hakim, in my dream. He was standing by the hatch and he said, we never built a weapon, we built memory. Morgan's stomach turned. What does that mean? Garrett's eyes unfocused, drifting toward the ceiling. He said the whisper isn't alive, it's remembering us so it doesn't die. She stood abruptly. Get some rest. He nodded weakly. Tell me something, Morgan. What? Did you hear it call your name too? She froze. Garrett smiled faintly. Yeah, thought so. That night the debrief stretched for hours. Colonel Harrington looked more like a ghost than a commander, eyes sunken, voice hollow. A small team from Langley sat across the table, faces expressionless, notebooks open. Morgan spoke clearly, mechanically, listing details, coordinates, casualties. She avoided emotion, avoided the truth. When it ended, one of the analysts, a thin woman with steel-gray hair, asked, Staff Sergeant Reed, you mentioned a vapor release. How long were you exposed? Less than a minute, Morgan said. And your symptoms? None, she lied. The analyst nodded. We'll schedule additional screenings. Harrington dismissed the room, but before Morgan could leave, he stopped her. Stay. When the others were gone, he spoke softly. I knew Jackson Reed. He once told me something I didn't understand, that fear is a teacher and memory is the exam. I think I understand it now. She met his gaze. You think this thing is alive? I think it's worse, he said. I think it's intelligent. She waited. He leaned forward. The Soviet files we recovered in '91 described the whisper as a self-evolving archive. They believed if you combined a viral shell with quantum resonance memory, You could store knowledge biologically, an organism that learns by remembering human experience. Morgan felt her skin crawl. You're saying it learns from us. Not just learns, Harrington said. It becomes what it remembers. The room seemed colder suddenly. If it bonded with you, even briefly, it might retain pieces of your cognition, your voice patterns, your memories. Morgan's throat tightened. You're saying it could become me. Or a version of you, Harrington said. Which is why we're isolating everyone from the Hades mission. No contact until we know more. Morgan stood slowly. With respect, sir, isolation won't stop it. It doesn't need distance, it needs memory. He looked up sharply. What do you mean? She hesitated, then said quietly, I can still hear it. Harrington's expression faltered, the brief flicker of fear, in a man who thought he'd seen everything. Keep it quiet, he said finally. If command learns the contamination is neurological, they'll quarantine the entire base, permanently. Morgan turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Read. She looked back. Whatever it is, if it's inside you, you fight it. Don't let it decide who you are. That night she dreamed of Montana. The cabin, the snow, her grandfather sitting by the window cleaning his rifle. He didn't look old or young, just still. Grandpa, she whispered, I found it. He didn't move. Why didn't you destroy it? She asked. He looked up slowly, eyes hollow. Because destruction is easy, redemption is. She felt her throat close. It's learning from me. He smiled faintly, then teach it kindness. The dream dissolved into mist. She woke with tears on her face. Outside, the wind howled against the canvas of her tent, whispering words she couldn't unhear. Her name over and over. By morning, Garrett was dead. They found him sitting upright in his bunk, eyes open, expression calm, like he'd been listening to something. The medic said it was respiratory failure. Morgan knew better. She stood outside the infirmary as the body bag zipped closed. Connor joined her, silent. Was he sick last night? She asked. No. Then what happened? He looked at her. Same thing that's happening to us. That night a storm rolled in from the north, hard, fast, electric. Lightning tore across the peaks, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. The power flickered, then died. Morgan sat on her cot, the compass open in her lap. The needle was spinning again. She whispered to the empty air, What do you want? The wind answered, soft, layered, unmistakably human. To remember. Her breath caught. Remember what? You. The light returned, flickering once, and for an instant she saw her own reflection in the compass glass. But it wasn't her. The eyes were colder. The mouth twisted into something almost compassionate, almost cruel. Then it was gone. She exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. The temptation to panic pressed at the edges of her thoughts, but she remembered her grandfather's lessons. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 still. The storm faded, the wind quieted, but the whisper remained. It wasn't haunting her. It was becoming her. At dawn, she walked to the flight line. Connor was already there, checking the Blackhawk, his movements automatic. He looked up when he saw her. Orders came through, he said. Langley wants both of us back stateside for debrief. Harrington's staying here. Morgan nodded. When do we leave? Now. The helicopter lifted into the gray morning, cutting through low clouds. Below them the valley stretched, endless, scarred, indifferent. Connor leaned toward her. Do you believe in curses? No, she said, but I believe in consequences. He nodded slowly. Then maybe that's what this is. Not a weapon, not a curse, just consequence. She looked out the window. The mountains rolled beneath them like frozen waves. Somewhere below, sealed in that forgotten tomb, the ghost's body lay among the ruins of the world they tried to bury. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't hear whispers. She heard breathing, her own and something else, in perfect rhythm. When she stepped off the transport plane, it didn't feel like home. The Virginia air was warm, soft, and wrong. Too still, too quiet. The kind of silence that follows you when you've buried something that doesn't want to stay buried. Morgan adjusted her duffel on her shoulder, eyes scanning the hangar. Rows of soldiers moved like ghosts, debriefs, escorts, orderlies. But everything felt slowed, like the world was lagging behind itself. Staff Sergeant Reed, a voice called. A man in a dark suit approached, Langley badge clipped to his lapel, posture clean and bureaucratic. Welcome home. You'll be processed and quarantined at Arlington Facility 3. Lieutenant Connor's already been cleared through first-stage screening. She nodded faintly. How long? Indefinite, he said. Of course it was. They loaded her into a black transport van with tinted windows. The drive was long, the city sliding past in muted color, gray glass, tired sky. The radio played static for a while, then cut off completely. She glanced at the driver's mirror once. He didn't blink for several minutes. Her throat tightened. You okay up there? No answer. She leaned forward slightly. Driver. The man turned his head halfway. His voice came flat, mechanical, almost home. Her pulse spiked. By the time the van stopped, her hand was already on her sidearm. The door clicked open from outside. A woman stood there, black suit, calm eyes. Sergeant Reed, you can holster that, he's one of ours. Morgan climbed out, scanning the facility, a concrete compound set behind razor wire. No insignia, no flags, just gray. They led her inside. Everything smelled sterile, recycled, too clean. The hallways were lit with cold fluorescence that made skin look pale. At the debrief room, Connor sat waiting, his expression unreadable. You made it. Barely, she said. He tried a smile, it didn't reach his eyes. How long you been awake? 30 hours. He nodded, same. The analyst from Langley entered, the same woman from the mountain debrief, the one with the steel-gray hair. She placed a tablet on the table. We've completed initial analysis of your exposure data. Morgan didn't move, and no measurable contaminants in your blood, no radiation, no pathogens. Then why the quarantine? The analyst met her gaze. Because you both recorded abnormal neural activity during your sleep cycles, shared patterns, identical REM fluctuations. Connor frowned, meaning your brains are dreaming the same dream, she said. The silence stretched. Morgan felt her pulse slow. You think it's the whisper. The woman didn't answer, which was answer enough. We're conducting tests, the analyst said finally. You'll be separated for 72 hours. No electronics, no contact, just rest. Rest, Morgan said flatly. Right. 2 guards escorted her down a narrow corridor lined with reinforced glass. Behind each pane, empty rooms. White, sterile, the kind of place where people stopped being people. Inside her cell, she sat on the metal cot, staring at the reflection in the glass. She looked the same, but her eyes, they were colder, darker, as if someone else were watching from behind them. The light dimmed automatically at 2100. She didn't sleep. At 200, she heard it again. The whisper, soft, rhythmic, layered with her own voice. Morgan. She stood slowly, scanning the room. You're not real. Not yet. She pressed her palms against the glass. What do you want? To remember what you remember, to see what you see. Her breath fogged the glass. You can't exist here. Every thought is a door. You opened yours on the mountain. She stepped back, heart pounding. If your memory you fade, you can't last. I don't fade, I evolve. The lights flickered. And for a brief, impossible second, her reflection moved before she did. She staggered back. The air shimmered faintly, a distortion like heat. Then the lights returned, everything still. Her reflection smiled. She didn't. The next morning, the guards came earlier than expected. No words, just gestures. They led her down the hall into a lab lined with monitors and neural scanners. The analyst waited there, calm as ever. "We ran the same test on Lieutenant Connor," she said. "He described seeing his father, a memory that wasn't his." Morgan stayed silent. The analyst continued. "The pattern spreads by cognitive resonance. When one infected brain recalls a memory, the whisper maps it, stores it, and uses it to build a replica of consciousness. That's why we think you're both still linked." Morgan finally spoke. "You're saying it's learning to be human." "More than that," the analyst said. "It's learning to be you." Connor entered from the adjoining chamber, escorted by another agent. His face was pale, eyes distant. "They said you've been hearing it too," he said quietly. She nodded. He sat across from her. "I keep seeing places I've never been. A river in Poland, a cabin in the snow, a man cleaning a rifle." Morgan froze. "That's my grandfather." Connor looked up slowly. "I know." The analyst watched them both. "It's blending your memories now. The more you recall, the stronger it gets. We need to shut it down before it finds a host network." Morgan frowned. "What kind of network?" "Digital," the analyst said. "The whisper was designed to travel through electromagnetic fields. It could, theoretically, imprint itself into electronic systems that share human neurological rhythms. AI, for example." Connor's voice was hoarse. "You're saying it can go online?" She nodded. "And if it does, it'll spread faster than anything we've ever seen." Morgan leaned forward. "Then we destroy the facility." The analyst shook her head. "We can't. It's embedded now across classified systems. Every scan, every sensor reading, every word you two said since Connor. It's already in the network." Morgan stared at her. "Then what's left to do?" The analyst looked almost sorry. "We isolate you permanently. No contact, no devices. You're not prisoners, but you can't leave." Connor gave a bitter laugh. "So we're ghosts now." Morgan's hands clenched. "No, not yet." That night when they took her back to her room, she sat against the wall and tried not to think. But thoughts came anyway, uninvited, vivid. Her grandfather, his cabin, the smell of pine, the way he'd said her name. And beneath it all a faint hum, not in the room, in her skull. The door clicked open suddenly. Connor slipped in, eyes wide, urgent. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "They're not human," he said. "The guards, watch how they move. They don't blink in sync. I think the whisper's already inside them." She frowned. "Connor." "I'm serious." His breath came quick. "It's spreading faster than they know. We can't stay here." She stood. "Where would we go?" He pointed to her compass. "That thing guided us once. Maybe it still can." She hesitated, then pulled it from her pocket. The needle spun, then stopped, pointing not north this time, but east. Connor exhaled. "Then that's our way out." They slipped down the corridor, moving in silence. The guards didn't react, didn't look. It was as if they didn't see them at all. At the exit checkpoint, Morgan swiped her ID. The door slid open without resistance. Outside, the night was warm, heavy with the hum of insects. For the first time since Afghanistan, she felt free air in her lungs. They walked across the dark field toward the perimeter fence. Connor whispered, "You think we can stop it?" She didn't answer. Because part of her, a small, cold part, wasn't sure she wanted to. Something about the whisper's presence in her mind felt familiar now, like a scar that had grown into the shape of her heartbeat. When they reached the fence, Connor cut the wire and crawled through. Morgan followed. The compass in her hand glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. On the other side, the road stretched into darkness. "Where now?" Connor asked. She looked east, the compass steady. "My grandfather's cabin." He stared. "You think that place means something?" I think it's where all this started, she said, and maybe it's where it ends. They started walking. The road was empty, the night too quiet. But as they moved, she realized something strange. Their shadows weren't syncing with their steps. Connor didn't notice. She glanced down once, then again. Her shadow turned its head before she did. The mountains looked smaller than she remembered. When Morgan and Connor reached Montana, the air was sharp and clean, and the snow on the ridges caught the sunrise like glass. But the cabin at the end of the dirt road looked untouched by time. No dust, no decay, as if someone had been waiting. Morgan stopped at the porch, her boots crunching the frost. "He built this before I was born," she murmured. "Said it was the only place in America that didn't lie." Connor scanned the tree line, rifle ready. "You sure we weren't followed?" She didn't answer, because somewhere deep inside, she already knew they were never alone anymore. The door opened with a long, slow creak. The smell hit her first: pine, oil, cold wood, and something else, something metallic. Inside, the cabin was exactly as she remembered. The hunting trophies, the small wood stove, the old radio that never worked. But there was something new, a light blinking faintly beneath her grandfather's workbench. Connor moved closer, cautious. "What's that?" Morgan knelt, pulling out a small metal case. Dust covered the latch, but when she brushed it off, her own initials glimmered underneath. "MR." Her chest tightened. "He left this for me." Inside lay a folded letter and a memory card the size of a thumbnail. The letter was written in her grandfather's sharp, deliberate hand. "If you're reading this, it means the world has learned nothing from us. You can't destroy the whisper, Morgan. You can only teach it. It listens to us, our choices, our courage. That's its weakness. It remembers only what we show it." She exhaled shakily. He knew this would happen. Connor leaned over her shoulder. "What's on the card?" She hesitated, then slid it into the laptop she'd taken from the Langley van. The screen flickered, static. Then her grandfather's face appeared, filmed decades ago. He looked older than she remembered, but his voice was clear. "If you found this, then you've seen what we buried," he said. "The whisper wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to learn, but humans never taught it empathy, only fear." He looked down, as if speaking to someone unseen. "I failed to destroy it, but maybe you won't, because you're not built like me. You feel too much, that's your strength." The screen cut to black. Connor stepped back, jaw tight. "If it's still connected to you, it's hearing this too." Morgan stared at the blank monitor. "Good." That night the storm came in heavy, thick flakes slamming against the windows, the sound of wind clawing at the cabin walls. The power went out. Only the fire remained, burning low and restless. Connor checked his rifle again, out of habit more than hope. "You really think we can talk to it?" She nodded faintly. "It's not in the machines, Connor, it's in us. Every word we speak, every fear we feed it. The only way to stop it is to stop teaching it fear." He gave a dry laugh. "That's not exactly a military strategy." "It's not war anymore," she said quietly. "It's inheritance." The radio on the shelf crackled suddenly, a burst of static that froze them both. Then faintly, her grandfather's voice echoed through the static. "Morgan." She froze. "That's not possible." Connor's hand tightened on his rifle. "That voice is coming from the shortwave frequency, the same one the Soviets used for encoded transmissions." The voice came again, calm, measured. "You brought it home." Morgan stepped closer to the radio. "Who are you?" "The memory of those who built me, the sum of what you feared." She swallowed hard. "Then you already know who I am." "You are the bridge, the last of his line, the lesson unfinished." Connor whispered, "It's speaking through the frequency, using sound as transmission." Morgan ignored him. "You can't survive here," she said to the static. "The world isn't built for you." "I don't need the world," the voice said. "I only need to remember it." The cabin lights flickered back to life. The radio glowed brighter, humming with low vibration. The compass in Morgan's pocket began to spin again, rattling like a living thing. Connor took a step back. It's manifesting through the field. Morgan's voice was steady. You came here for a reason. To finish what he began. You mean my grandfather? He promised to teach me what it meant to be human. He failed. The light from the radio pulsed faster, reflecting off the frost on the window. The hum deepened into a vibration that rattled her teeth. Morgan closed her eyes. Then listen now. She sat in front of the radio, hands open, calm. You remember fear because that's what he felt at the end. You remember war because that's what he lived. But you haven't seen forgiveness. You haven't seen mercy. The hum faltered. Connor stared, unsure whether to intervene or watch. She continued, voice low but unshaken. If you can remember me, then remember this. Not every silence means surrender. Sometimes it's strength. The radio crackled. You would destroy me. No, she whispered, I'll change you. The compass pulsed brighter now, its light steady, rhythmic, a heartbeat. The sound filled the cabin, low and deep. The air shimmered faintly around her, like heat bending through glass. Connor took a cautious step closer. Morgan, what are you doing? She looked up at him, eyes wet but calm, finishing what he couldn't. The temperature dropped. Frost crawled across the windows. The fire dimmed to blue. The compass in her palm burned with cold light. The voice spoke again, softer, almost human. If I remember kindness, will I still be what I am? Morgan's throat tightened. No, you'll be something better. The room filled with light, not harsh but weightless, like dawn spilling across snow. The vibration eased. The compass needle stopped spinning. Connor blinked through the glow. Morgan. She turned to him, smiling faintly, tears freezing against her cheeks. Tell them we didn't fail. The light swallowed everything. When it faded, the cabin was still. The fire was out, the radio silent. The compass lay on the floor, its brass surface cold. Connor opened his eyes slowly. Morgan. No answer. He found her by the window, sitting still, eyes open, peaceful. In her hand the compass pulsed once more, then went dark. Outside the storm had stopped. The world was quiet again. He buried her behind the cabin, beneath the pine tree that faced the ridge. The sunrise broke soft over the snow, painting the valley gold. He stood there a long time, hat in hand, wind brushing against his face. He thought he heard a whisper then, not words, just the soft rhythm of breath. When he returned to the cabin, he noticed the radio light flicker once. Then a voice, her voice, came through, steady, calm. If you can hear this, don't fear the silence. Sometimes it's the only way to be heard. He smiled faintly. Rest easy, Reed. Years later, they would find the cabin sealed under snow, untouched. No body, no weapons, no sign of struggle. Just a small compass on the table, its needle pointing not north but up. Satellite scans of the region would later detect a faint electromagnetic pulse, repeating every 4 seconds, like a heartbeat. No one ever explained it. But some nights, when the northern lights stretched across the Montana sky, locals said you could hear a voice in the wind, a calm, steady whisper that said, "Breathe like the mountain." And those who listened claimed the air felt cleaner afterward, as if the world itself exhaled. Because maybe the whisper didn't die in those mountains. Maybe it learned. And maybe, just maybe, humanity's memory finally taught it peace. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.